All right, so we're going to cover the last part of Chapter 1, Section 1 today, and we're going to speak about, at least I'm going to talk about, the purpose of government. And it kind of gets wrapped up in all in this. And we've talked about the four characteristics needed to have a state and the origins of the state from a political science theory point of view. Now we can actually talk about what does government do. And in American government, we can find that in one easy place, and that's in the beginning of the Constitution, under the preamble or the opening of our Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. I mean, that's how we open up the Constitution. And the great part about the Constitution is we can find the six goals that the framers laid out for us. And so we can look at, okay, so the first overall goal is to form a more perfect union right here. And then we have establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. So these six goals actually have, some concrete things to them that help us explain why our government exists and what purposes does it serve. So let's start with the first one. Let's go ahead and move on to form a more perfect union. So the United States, which had just won its independence from Great Britain, had existed under a form of government known as the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation were our first official form of government, and I like to refer to them as the suck salad, sprinkled upon which you would find the bacon bits of despair. It is just a horrible, horrible document. And the purpose of the Articles of Confederation was to form what was called a firm league of friendship. And in the next chapter, we're going to get into some different styles of government, like the difference between a federal system, a unitary system, and a confederal system or a confederation. A confederation is defined as a loose association of states, and the Articles of Confederation did its best to define loose when it came to trying to hold this country together. Under the Articles of Confederation, though, the 13 colonies, which had become the 13 states, still saw themselves as 13 independent nations, not one unified nation. And so the Articles of Confederation held them in this league of friendship. But it was weak, it was powerless, it was terrible. That league was neither firm nor friendly. Some states like Maryland and Virginia threatened to go to war with each other over water rights. Some states were trying to conduct their own treaties with other foreign powers, like, hey, let's create a treaty with Spain, and it would just affect that one state. And so there was no real strength under the Articles. So when the Constitution is written, as a result, to form a more perfect union was basically saying the Articles of Confederation are terrible, and let's find a more perfect union, because in union there was strength. If we look down here at the cartoon in the bottom corner, we see Benjamin Franklin's famous political cartoon, The Join or Die, which he proposed at a meeting called the Albany Plan of Union, where he suggested that in 1754 that the colonies come together in one united front to assist in the French and Indian War. And it didn't take place, but it was the seed that was sown that would later bear fruit in the Constitution. The second goal is the establishment of justice, to establish justice. So to provide justice, Thomas Jefferson said it was the most sacred of all the duties of government. There was no purpose, no goal of public policy, and that could be greater of greater importance within a democracy. But with what is justice, it's pretty difficult to define, because justice is a concept. It's an idea. It's, an invention of the human mind. And so we have other concepts like truth and fairness and liberty. Justice means just what people want it to mean. So they get to apply their own concept to it. So if we look at it from an American point of view, justice in America is the law in both content and administration, and it must be reasonable, fair, and impartial. Now, this hasn't always been the case, but the goal is to continue that particular course. And here in the summer of 2020, a lot of people are looking at how justice is not necessarily blind, especially when we talk about police brutality, things along those lines, how racism or bigotry can have an impact on the overall justice system. We have to remember that Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And we're going to try and look at that more and more as we go throughout the course of the semester. All right, so to ensure domestic tranquility, order is essential to the well-being of any society, and it is necessary to keep the peace. Keeping the peace is supposed to be a necessary prime function of government. And we expect that to be held in check through the executive branch. We don't want to live in a state of anarchy where there are no laws, without government, without law, without order. And we kind of see that happening a little bit in what happened in the summer of 2020 with the CHOP or Chaz movement in Seattle, with many of these protests. It seems that some of these people are anarchists and calling for a complete and total lack of government or control. And that's not necessarily the best route if we're going to follow through with the tenets of the social contract that I talked about in the last video. We look at, for example, James Madison. He's known as the father of the Constitution and the father of the Bill of Rights. And he writes in the Federalist or the Federalist Papers, especially in number 51, that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Well, we're not angels, and that's pretty glaringly obvious. And Madison was probably the most thoughtful and conscientious of the framers of the Constitution, and he knew that people fell well short of the standard, and so therefore we need to have some type of order to ensure the domestic tranquility. All right, so now let's provide for the common defense. Defending the nation against foreign enemies has always been one of government's major responsibilities, no matter what state we're talking about. And for the most part, providing for the common defense is, hey, we're going to have a military, we're going to maintain it, and the result is our security as a nation is dependent upon that. And so we need to have a sound defense policy, and we also need to have a organized way of dealing with foreign states, and this is known as foreign policy. And so we maintain an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, the Marines as part of the Navy, the Coast Guard, and now that we've created the Space Force to defend our interests in orbit, especially with technology and satellite stuff. So we even have now the Department of Homeland Security, which came about after the attacks on the United States on September 11th of 2001. So we've become the world's most powerful nation, but the world remains a really dangerous place, and we need to maintain a degree of vigilance. We need to exude strength, and that way we can continue to guarantee our own defense and the defense of our allies. All right, to promote the general welfare. And few people actually realize that the government is supposed to actually be the servant of its citizens. The government doesn't give us rights. The Constitution guarantees our rights so that the government will not impede upon them. And so the government should act as our servant. And as a result of that, the government should provide us with public services like public schools and roads, public airways guarded by the FCC, clean water and air, protecting the environment for our own health and well-being. Those are good examples of how the government is supposed to promote the general welfare. OSHA to guarantee that certain working conditions are safe. My dad was a coal miner, and safety was of the utmost importance because, terrible things could happen underground. And people could be endangered. And so the government created the policies that were necessary in order for the miners to do their jobs, but also for the guarantee that their services, their labor would produce a product that was beneficial to people, because it was burned by power companies and so forth. All right. And then lastly here, secure the blessings of liberty. And this one may be a little more harder to put, to grasp, but it's a little more flowery. But freedom is necessary for a functioning democracy. This nation was founded by those who loved liberty and prized it above earthly possessions. If you look at the ending of the Declaration of Independence, they talk about risking their lives and their sacred honor in order to fulfill their obligation to break the colonies away from the British government. And Thomas Jefferson says, hey, the God who gave us liberty, gave us life, gave us liberty at the same time. We are born free. And Franklin would echo that sentiment when he said, they who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now, this goes back to the social contract. You want to give up as little freedom as possible to gain some security. But some of the framers and the founders of our country felt like, hey, you know what? We want to give up a little bit, but we want to have as little amount of government intruding upon our lives as possible, because they had felt that the government of Britain under King George III in Parliament was interfering in their lives too much. So we're here. We've we have went through the 6 purposes of our government, and that brings us to the end of Chapter 1, Section 1. And hopefully you've completed all the exercises as we went through this, and we're ready to move on to the next phase. Thanks for listening.